All right, it's 1 o'clock. We have great attendance. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I was getting a little concerned. Ben and I were just here all by ourselves almost to start out with, so thank you, everybody, for coming. We have a good agenda, and so we'll start out with number 1, approve Tax-Exempt Review Committee meeting minutes of 8/28/2018 meeting. If you've had a chance to review the minutes, if there's any changes or corrections, we'd love to hear them, but otherwise, I would accept a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda item number 2, pilot application by the Edge 2 LLC for a for-profit low-income housing tax credit apartment project. And maybe, Ben, you can start us off.
Sure. The applicant is here, and there are only a few copies of the layout plan, so we may have to do some sharing. Page 3, I've included our staff summary. Our policy on the for-profit low-income housing tax credit projects is it's contingent upon them getting the low-income housing tax credit funds from Housing and Finance. And our policy is to basically tax them at their restricted rent levels using a gross rent multiplier of 5.5. And I've included the projected pilot payment full on the very last page, page 15. The projected pilot payment, if all political subs participate, and also at Aaron's request, included what the payment would be if the county opted out, which they did on their first project. So with that, I guess we'd open it up to the floor.
So if anybody has any, please feel free to, go ahead, Jim.
I know with the low-income housing tax credit program, you get a certain number of points for some local match and this council's local match. So I think maybe explain to the committee how important that is to get this approved. And just want to say for the committee too that this is a very competitive process. And so, you know, if a city doesn't participate in a local match, it really makes it difficult for them to get their financing. But
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. And I'm Erin Anderson with Commonwealth Development Corporation. Many of you, I believe, were here last year about this time when we were presenting on the first phase of this project, the Edge Artist Flats. In regards to your question, every point is very, very valuable. They're typically only about half of the projects that apply are funded. The tax credits are a very limited resource, and I believe we're estimating that this would provide us 4 points, which it could be huge. It could make or break. Even 1 point could be what gets a project awarded versus the next one. So it's incredibly helpful and oftentimes critical to a project to receive local support points. Do you want me to give you a brief overview at this time, or?
Yep, that'd be fantastic,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Thank you. All right. So as I mentioned, we started construction on the first phase just recently, which is the Edge Artist Flats, and we're really thrilled that that's underway. Thank you all for your support on that. At the time that we put that development together, we knew that there was room on the site for a potential phase 2. We also knew that, based on our market analysis, that there was enough demand to really fulfill a much larger project than what we started out with. The limiting factor is, with these tax credits, is the amount that you can ask for per funding round. And so essentially what we do is work backwards to say what size of project can be funded at this time. And at last year it was 45 units. This year we're looking at 48 units, which also fits nicely on the site. When we replatted this site We planned for the circulation pattern that you see. Sorry that we didn't bring more copies of the site plan, but the building on the left, on the west side, that is the new building, and on the east, the L-shaped one on the corner there is the one that's under construction. So this new development will largely mirror the current one that's under construction. The primary difference is that we are opening it up to the new program that was passed during the tax reform, which is called income averaging. And what that does is allow a wider array of incomes to qualify. With the prior phase that's currently under construction, it went up to 50% area median income. With this one, we will have some units up to 80% area median income, which we believe is really an exciting opportunity to target the affordable workforce. And the way that the new rule works, you just have to average at 60% area median income under the current tax credit program. So our average over all the units that we're proposing with the Edge 2 is 54%. So it still averages below that threshold per the IRS guidelines. But it just allows, more flexibility in terms of who can rent while still maintaining affordability, and all the rents are still below market.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt your presentation, but do you mind if we ask a question or two, or would you rather wait till that?
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine.
So on page 9, where it kind of has a breakout of the different houses.
Yeah.
Can you explain that? So the 30% median income, but then it's supportive housing trust fund. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. So the first, on page 9, the first 3 lines, there's 2, 5, and 1 units shown that say permanent supportive housing trust fund. Those units are set aside as permanent supportive housing for folks that are either disabled or homeless. We're assuming 0 rent, because oftentimes they will be coming in with what could be, 0 income. And so that's why you don't see any rent for those units.
So can I ask you, how does that go? Are they referred to you, and then is there a certain
Yes.
amount of time that they will be able to stay at that, or is it unspecified?
They sign a 1-year lease, just like everyone else does.
Okay.
They are referred through, we're working with a supportive housing provider that will be taking applications from folks in need, and then they'll pass them off to our compliance folks and our property manager for further processing. And then they end up with a regular 1-year lease, just like everyone else in the building does. The only difference being that their rent is effectively 0.
And is there any reimbursement to the landlord out of any funding, or is it strictly?
We end up with a construction source. The Housing Trust Fund
Right.
is a federal resource that's available for these types of units. They're really focused on either the very low income or so folks under 30% AMI.
But
Or
you don't receive an
permanent
annual or monthly subsidy from?
Nope.
No.
Nope, it'll come in as a construction source and then get utilized to help offset some of the
So
costs.
those 8 units are permanently set aside then?
Right,
Okay.
If,
31 years.
if someone, moves into one of these supportive units and are able to, get a job and they no longer need the supportive services, is it correct they get to stay in the building and then you would open up another unit for supportive housing? Is that how that works? Or do they move to a different apartment or?
If they move, so the unit is designated as permanent supportive housing. So in this case, we'd only have the 8 units set aside until they move out. There won't be another one available.
Just at the end of their lease, basically.
Yeah, if they move out at the end of their lease. So it won't open up, we can't accept another one until that unit becomes free again.
If they were to get a job and no longer qualify, would they have to move out, or can they move?
They
to-
stay.
Okay.
They
But
stay,
just pay
but,
higher rent?
yeah, they stay, but unfortunately, we just aren't, yeah, we aren't able to open it up for another zero rent unit, because then it would, obviously, there's no way we would be able to underwrite that. But yes, they get to stay indefinitely. And the idea is that housing first is the model that we're kind of working from, and really the idea that housing provides the backbone for stability for a family and can help reduce medical costs. And, you think of kids in schools that are struggling because of homelessness. That's really the heart of what we're getting at here.
Go ahead.
We had the same question last year. I'll ask it again, just clarifying. So you have 8 units for zero rent. It's not subsidized other than the construction funding. If I come in, I'm a family of 3, 4, whatever, have no job for a while, I can go and qualify in some fashion. I don't know what the qualifications are, but qualify for that unit. I get a job 2 months later, my spouse gets a job, and I can stay in that same unit forever.
You can. Can't kick you out. You can stay.
Even if now I'm making more than anybody else in the building.
That's right.
However, you just said they'd sign a 1-year lease, so when the lease is up, couldn't the landlord just refuse to renew that lease?
No.
You couldn't under this program?
And this is the issue we had with the first one. That's one of the reasons the county was not in on this deal the first time around, so I wanted to clarify that.
No, it's a good question, but part of it is legally, you have to follow the rules.
I understand,
And so,
but if you don't like the rules, you don't play the game.
yeah.
You don't try to change the rules once you're in the game, but you gotta know the rules going in, and I'm okay with it.
So the perspective, the reason why we're not going to kick somebody out because they get a job is that's very much a double-edged sword. You don't want to disincentivize somebody from working. So
Does their rent change if they get a job at the end of the year lease?
yes, the rent does change. So if they end up with income, their rent could end up being up to 30% of their income.
So I think a lot of times people do move to somewhere else because if they're going to have to pay that
Yeah.
much. In practical terms, they do
could.
tend to move.
So I do think that's a critical point to make, that a lot of people, because this is all new to us, to most of us here, and so I think we're learning a lot. So I think it's kind of an opportunity for us, especially because some of the city commissioners are not that bright like myself, so to reiterate what's going on, because I think everyone knows this is a great thing. This is exactly what we were talking about, workforce housing and a low-income component. So this is what we were hoping, what would hope to happen. So go ahead.
So with the, following up on Jim's comment, so somebody, they get a job a year later, they're reassessed, after they have incomes, their rent can go up to 30%
Of their
of their income, but they're not asked to leave, they don't have to leave, right? So now, you over a short period of time, you have 8 units that are available for zero or low-income people. And they may become available again,
Right.
possibly they may not. I mean, that's just one of the deals.
Exactly.
Okay, right.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to something you talked about really early on, and that is, I think you said that you look at the availability of credits, and then you size the project based upon the availability, so the 48 units. So my question is that the optimum size for this project, or if there were more credits available, would you be building and able to build more units?
Well, if you look at the site, we're going 5 stories. We're matching the same height as the one that's under construction right now. And we're pretty well maxed out on the site. So it turns out that it does work out very nicely in proportion to the size of the site as well. It's kind of it ends up working out on both fronts, both from a site planning perspective and from a financial feasibility
You can
standpoint.
respond to that too. Really, when you look at all the applications that are submitted, they're all around this 40 to 50 unit
Yeah.
because that's the most credits the state's likely to allow.
Right.
Yeah, they're only going to do 4 to 5 projects a year. They want to spread it around. And so if you like the high rise last year, it asked for a larger number, they ended up getting a really low score and not qualifying. So, some of the other ones we've seen in town where you want to do a multiple or larger project, you end up building it 40 units at a time over a number of years. I think Homefield, 3 is coming in, and so it has more to do with the limitations that the state has put on the program versus maybe an optimal site size, because even if you have a big site, people tend to apply for 40 to 50 units or less.
Right, yep. That is based on that funding limitation. If we had a larger site here, then I would say there could be a situation where you would wish you could go bigger. It just so happens in this case, it happens to be sized very nicely for this.
And this is a question for our staff. One of the questions is, I wonder what school they will go to. Do you know? All right, we'll have to, anyway, for the future, well, it'd be just for interest, I think it'd be interesting. I don't know if you know, Jim.
I think it would be Roosevelt and near North Side there.
I thought it might be Roosevelt too, but I'm not 100%.
I think Main Avenue is a dividing line, but I'm not 100% sure.
Anyway, we'll look at that before it comes. Ken?
I had a question as I look at your rent schedule on page 9.
Yeah.
Administratively, how do you manage the qualification process and the demand for getting into these units? If you had 50 people apply for one unit, how do you ultimately pick somebody? Do you score them by metrics, or do you score them by interview, or by referral, or how does that work?
For all other than the 8 permanent
Yep.
supportive housing ones we were talking about, those would be on a first come, first serve wait list. So they'll come in on a wait list in order of when they come in, and then from there, there's income qualification, criminal background check, credit check, and if they meet all of those and they were the next in line on the waiting list, then they're placed in the unit.
And could you share how long your waiting list is?
Oh, well, we just started construction on the first one, so I don't know that we have that much. We're not even really allowed to take applications quite yet on the one that we just started construction, but I'd be happy to update you guys as we get a little further along with it.
Do you
It
have,
seemed like there'd be large demand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
do you have limits on their rent? Can you charge more than 30% of their income for rent, or are you capped at what?
On the permanent supportive housing units, we can charge only up to 30% of their income. On the rest of the units, the amount you see on this schedule is all we're going to be charging.
Okay.
And that's the maximum. That is the amount that their rent will be set at. And those are based on the tax credit program's guidelines for what they consider to be affordable at certain income limits. So it's slightly different because it doesn't change based on their income. It's based on when they initially move into the unit, what their income limit is assigned to that unit that they qualified for.
This is kind of an interesting, change to this program, and that this averaging, because if you look at these units, you'll see that in the same building, you'll have 15 households that are very low income and 19 households that are more at market rate. And part of this philosophy is to try to not have a building that's just very low income people, and to more have a mix of people is hopefully a better environment for everyone.
Yep.
So when you look at chart on page 15, I'm just curious how much taxes are paid yearly?
It starts out at about 45,000, I believe, is what we're paying. 41,000.
Which column is that, if I find?
The green,
The-
pilot plus tax.
Pilot plus tax on the chart on the right is assuming the county does not opt into the incentive. So if the county does not opt in, there would be the regular pilot payment, the additional pilot payment to the county, and that pilot and tax would start at $41,522. If the county did fully participate, it would be the green pilot and tax on the chart in the middle at $30,308. So that would be the land tax and the pilot.
And Ben, did the state legislature mandate this formula now, as I recall, for these low-income tax rated? Or was that still a negotiated deal?
The formula for this
Yeah.
incentive,
I think if there's a nonprofit involved, how does that work?
If there's a nonprofit involved, they would be fully exempt, but the county would bill them a payment in lieu at 5% of their gross less utility expenses.
That's what I was thinking of,
But
not
that's,
for privately
that's in
developed.
statute, but for profits,
Okay.
it's totally up to city policy.
Okay.
And then, Ben, what are they paying taxes now just on the land? Because what we have there is just land, right?
Yep.
It's, we're estimating the land tax, once the buildings are there, to be at about $5,200. It's less than that now because it's vacant land. But probably around $3,200 right now, I would guess,
And that site's been vacant for a long time, as I recall,
yes.
as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
So the incentive for the county to be involved is that we're doing low-income housing. The ability to get tax money to do this for a profit entity is hard to find as well, right? I mean, if I wanted 5 of these units in the community, it's hard to get that money to do that.
Yes, the applications are competitive. Like I said, about half of those who attempt it are successful in any given year. It's a lot of time and energy to put these together. A typical apartment developer is just not
So
interested
I have
in getting
240
involved.
people in the high-rise, and if I wanted to move them out, I'd have to find 240 spaces. What you're saying is it'd be difficult to do that?
To get through the process of securing all the different pieces of funding that are needed in order to keep the rents affordable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the high-rise is not applying this year. That's just a very complicated project, trying to put the financing together for that. And they have a new director, so I don't think they're submitting this year, but just for the commissioner's interest.
But Jim, if you took, 4 different projects, 5 different projects, this is 48 units, couldn't you download some?
I think that might be the best solution in the long term, is to do 5 projects over a period of 5 years. But when the state's only funding for a year, it gets really competitive.
So this application is still contingent upon getting the tax credits, is that right? And what's the timeline and probability of that, do we think?
I think, the benefit for the city and the county is that we get some low-income housing that's desperately needed in the community. And, and if we don't provide, some assistance, they're less likely to get the money. And then, the added benefit is you get $35,000 a year in property taxes instead of $3,200.
I think the other key issue is it's close to the downtown within walking distance. That's the other thing that I think that's what it's a concern for us, maybe not the county and the school district as much, but I mean, for the city of Fargo, the land prices in the downtown are going up. And so unless we make a concerted effort, we're not going to have any low-income housing in the downtown. And so that's why I think this is just a great opportunity, and hopefully we'll get some more because I think we're going to have to make effort to have this happen. It's not just this isn't going to happen just all by itself. And so I think it's a great opportunity, and I think we're fortunate, and hopefully we can copy those with other ones. So Jim, from your perspective, what do you think of this from the real estate and that perspective?
Well, that's kind of a broad question, but that was part of my thought process, is that particular site has been empty as long as I can remember, generating minimal revenue to the jurisdiction. So that's a key part of this program, and obviously it's addressing our stated policies of mixing up units, low-income housing, central city development. So my opinion is it meets all of our policy talking points, so I don't know why we wouldn't approve it. So.
Jim?
This is in the Roosevelt Horseman attendance area.
That's awesome. I think that's good to know. We have some concerns from the neighborhood group there, and so
Yeah.
I think this would be a real positive. The other thing, it's within walking distance of a grocery store,
Right.
walking distance of the downtown, and I would say one of the top Mexican restaurants, especially drive-through, is right across the street. So I don't know if that goes into the decision-making process.
Oh, that's a
but,
big deal for me. I love Mexican. Oh.
And the only other negative is it smells like fresh bread all the time there, and that would not be good for my health because it smells like you want to eat almost there all the time. So
Right? Yeah, it's a great location. There's a lot of, it's definitely an underutilized site. We do know that there's contamination on the site that we are already planning for, addressing that.
Which is another positive argument, cleaning up a contaminated
Yeah,
site and
yeah.
mitigating that.
And I think another good question to have an answer for is how long it's been vacant. Because, I mean, it's been, like
Long
you
time.
said, Jim, it's been a very long time, but just to even know what's that number, I think that would be good. Just
I think it goes
Yeah.
back to the time he played for the Bison.
Oh, gee. Oh, no. He's already being mean to me today.
I had to move a motion to approve.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. I'll let them second the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Further discussion.
Yes, thank you. So, as I understand this, I'm looking at the county office of, that's still on page 15. The county share, the 4524, is the county share of the pilot. Is that correct? That would be,
Correct. That'd be the
be
county share of that 25,138.
And then the county additional share, what is that?
Well, based on the current mill levy, the county share of, is 18%. So to make that 15,739 would be 18% of the total. And the county would only be getting the 4,500 from the regular pilot, so there would be an additional pilot to give the county what would be the full tax if the incentive wasn't there.
So I'm clear, so I can bring it to our board. Currently, the county would be getting about 5170.
The 5170, the land tax, that,
3,200 total.
but right now it's
only
about 3,200 because it's vacant.
For all
So the
tax
county
years.
would get 18% of that.
So the 5170, what is that?
That's the total tax on the projected land value.
Projected.
In 2
Yeah.
years.
So there'd be a pilot payment of 25,138 plus the 5170 land tax is what they would be paying.
So to Rick's question, that's currently paying 3,200 in land and 18% is county share. So
Well,
county's getting
right.
$600 roughly.
Yeah.
So Rick, the other thing that I think we should do, when it goes to the county, when it's on your agenda, whoever you want to have there from here, we will be there. Do you know what I mean? Because I think it's important that everybody knows that can hear what we've heard today. Does that make sense to you? So,
It does, and I'll just as, you know by experience already, the county really does not, at this stage, have much of an appetite for a 15-year pilot or 15
Right.
I mean, that's just a fact.
Yep.
I'm not going to say it can predict the future. Historically, we've not had that kind of appetite.
Right.
Forward, so, when we look at this, we're saying, the city gets great payment in the pilot payments. They get paid for doing something on the property, whatever. I'm guessing that's what the 400 and some odd dollars is for. That's what the pilot payments are for improvements on the land. What's the city getting paid for in the pilot payments?
The pilot payments go to the county to be,
No, we
but-
get zero of the pilot payments. We don't get any money on the pilot payments right now. The county does not.
No, the
no, I
pilot, the
think-
pilate payments are distributed just like the real estate
Like
tax.
you said, and like
Let me-
normal.
Hold
me-
on a second,
okay.
if I may. Because we just had this discussion with Mr. Montplaisir this morning. He indicated the county gets zero.
let me clarify that. For Fargo Public Housing pays a payment in lieu of taxes, completely different, really no law. But they pay a portion of the rent to the city. It doesn't go to the county. So for years, the Housing Authority has made a voluntary payment to the city for services. It's got nothing to do with the state pilot program, but they still call it a payment in lieu of taxes. And I think the West Fargo Housing, or the Cass County Housing Authority, because they're located in West Fargo, has made a voluntary payment to the city of West Fargo. And so, that started 40 years ago. The Housing Authority was created. They wanted to provide some support to the city for police and fire and all that. So they made that payment to the city. They did not pay the schools, the parks, or the county. And so it was a completely voluntary payment. And I'm trying to think, it was like 50 $1,000 a year in that range, so it's not a huge amount of money, but, so that's completely different than what you're talking
So
about for
does
this
the
program.
city have any of these current pilot programs in place? That we're talking about right now, do they have this same type of pilot program in place in any?
When we have some pilot payments, for instance, if an industry says you're going to pay 50% pilot, 100% of that pilot payment goes to the county and then it's distributed out. So if the pilot payment's set at 50,000, that goes to the county and the county distributes it. Very different than the housing authority payment.
And that's where the clarification needs to be made, because we talked to Mr. Montplaisir this morning, he said we don't get any payments from the city pilot programs.
From the housing authority.
He just said any. He didn't even specify housing.
Statute is specific. This particular statute, 40-57.1, which is called the new industry exemption, you can do an exemption or pilot. The pilots that are received are distributed the same as the real estate tax. Yes.
And that's, again, that's why we need clarification, because Robert was at the same meeting I was, that was not our understanding at that meeting.
Then so the 33,000 or the 25,000 that runs up to 23,000, if everybody participates, they will get a tax bill from the county for that amount,
Yep.
and the money will be paid to the county. Yes.
And I can forward you guys a copy of a most recent tax statement and show how that pilot shows up on the real estate tax statement.
That'd be great.
Yep.
So do we have currently any pilot programs in place for the city of Fargo that the county is currently making?
Yes.
If you could provide,
Yeah, there's
give me some parcel
couple.
numbers for that,
Yep.
that'd be great, because Mike was not aware of that.
Yeah, he may have been confused about the housing authority one.
Well, he indicated there were
Because-
different programs.
And I don't know if you recall from that PowerPoint I had, but is it $1 million a year in pilot payments?
That's somewhere around there, yeah.
In total.
And what the county does on the tax statement is they will, if the pilot payment is the $25,138, once the mill levy's set, they back into a valuation that shows up on the statement of an implied value to get that tax. And we send, every November 1st, I send the county the list of pilot payments for all those so that they can calculate it into the tax
That's the
statement.
case, great, but again, this is
Yep.
what we were shared with us.
No,
So if you give some parcel numbers, we'll look at it.
But I think this, once again, this is an opportunity for education of us, so we can,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's
so,
why I'm here.
no, and I appreciate you being here, because I think this
But
is,
you would see if the county got zipped, you'd see why you guys would vote no. So the reality, Jim, on these pilots, on these low-income housing, is basically we are cutting the tax that we get as a community to just partially invest so that they can do the project. Is that
Right.
simplistic part
Everyone
of it?
gets a little bit less, the counties, the schools, and the city.
So all of us contribute a bit to the project. We don't have to have any cash in hand. We just do it by the future taxes. And the reason it has to go to 15 years is because our tax rate is so low. Could they do it in 10 years if we had a 2% tax?
The reason you'll see the rent restrictions run 15 years, and so the city doesn't want to go any longer than 15 years because they only have to keep the low-income housing for 15 years. I think the state, in some cases, maybe pushes that out even longer, out to 30 years.
Yeah, it would be a problem if it was less than 15 years, simply because we have to underwrite for that full 15-year period of time at a minimum for the affordability period. So
But
they
then
don't want
have-
to see the rent jump up.
It takes you longer to make that happen. Is that what your issue is? Time, money, value?
It kind of takes 15 years to get their investors paid back.
They lock us in on all of our expenses, and especially property taxes, for those 15 years. They don't want to see them vary.
so I think that's also a very important thing, that when this goes to the Cass County Commission, that these things are explained, because they have some issues that they're concerned about, but if there's explanations, and you have some, this is a good time to do that. So I think we need to make sure that we are having everybody that needs to be there when the county is addressing this, to be at
Well,
at that
Jim
meeting.
and Ben should be there at least, eh?
That's what I mean.
And
Go
that,
ahead, Frank.
and this this item will be on our agenda for the 15th,
Okay.
October 15th, we're going to have it.
Okay. So just so everyone else is aware, and so we can make an attempt for everyone to be there that needs to be there.
Okay. So I don't know if this helps, and I certainly appreciate the effort to present this to the county with all the full information, but, I mean, right now, I'm just conservatively assuming that they're not going to approve it, if that alleviates any heartburn in the room.
I would rather you operate on the assumption
That
that
they
they
will.
are going to approve it, because I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
And I think this is a big deal. And so I know we need to work on some of our county commissioners, but I think if they're explained the importance of this and the reasons behind it, I think it's very important. And it's also very symbolic, I believe. So I'm an optimist, so I would like you to go with the assumption that they're going to approve it.
All right, sounds good.
You've toned down your approach.
You've been a good influence on me, Mr. Mayor. You're smoothing out the rough edges a little bit. So. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That's fantastic. Congratulations. I think this is going to be a great example, and I think we'll have hopefully other opportunities, because I think this is a very important thing for our city.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm always available to answer more questions if you think of anything. I think Ben has all my contact information if you need it. Thank you.
And this will be heard at the City Commission on October 22nd.
Very good. Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.